Topicals can be really great for pain. So if you've got pain, I think you should be thinking of topicals. And that includes musculoskeletal pain. It could be migraine headache pain, where you just rub a little of the lotion or topical on the temples or the back of the neck. There are benefits to every delivery method.
Hello, Awakened Beauties. Finally, it's here. The truth to empower women to true inner beauty through healthy biology. And now, here is your hostess, Cassandra Keel, your organic beauty and CBD mentor, helping you stay sane, get sleep, and bring your sexy back. Sponsored by EvoqBeauty.com.
Welcome to the Awaken Beauty Podcast. This is Cassandra, your organic beauty, positive mind management, and endocannabinoid mentor. And today on the podcast, I'm welcoming back a good friend, Dr. Jake Felice, who, if you missed the first episode, you can go back to episode 5, where Jake and I basically lay the groundwork of understanding what the endocannabinoid system is. What is the endocannabinoid system? It is this brilliant system of homeostasis that overruns our entire body, and it corresponds with cannabis. Now, today's episode, we are going to be talking about specifically terpenes and the correlation of them with topicals, as well as the latest research on liver toxicity and what the truth is with the research in the industry of cannabis and liver toxicity. Now, if you don't know who Dr. Jake is, Dr. Jake Felice provides scientific, medical, and compliance-based advice for companies in emerging and existing cannabis markets. Clinically, Dr. Felice specializes in the treatment of chronic pain and improvement on human performance. His comprehensive approach to pain combines traditional healing practices with the best of modern science. And he believes, as well as I, that memory, emotions, and entrenched neural patterns play an enormous role in how the mind perceives pain, and that the healing processes are managed on all levels that include physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Currently, Dr. Jake Felice maintains his practice in Washington State, and he continues consulting nationally. Jake, thank you so much for coming back to the Awaken Beauty Podcast. I can't wait to jump in. And so welcome.
Cassandra, I'm doing great today. Thank you. It's wonderful to be back on the show here.
Absolutely. And before we started, you shared that you're doing a little bit of a nice fast. So
I'm doing a very mild liquid diet fast today, mostly clear liquids, low sugar, just to get the mind clear, let the digestive system rest for, it's going to be about a 36-hour fast. So it's not really heavy or intense. But you may notice I'm not projecting as much energy as my prior self. It's just a result of it's been about 18 hours since I've had food. I feel great, by the way. So
I think it's great. Good fast is good for anybody. Yes. Well, welcome back to the show. And so, last time when we had met, we talked about just the fundamentals of the endocannabinoid system and cannabis. And I think just to kind of stretch us into today's episode, maybe we can just do a brief overview on the importance of our endocannabinoid system and how CBD and cannabis kind of interplay with this, and why this is such a hot topic, and why we're really actually just at the beginning of science and research on this really incredible system. So maybe you can just kind of explain to the listener how the endocannabinoid system works.
Absolutely. And just for folks, remember, we did a previous episode if you want to get more information. The endocannabinoid system is a recently discovered system. And when we last talked, between when we last talked and now, more and more clinicians, doctors are becoming aware of the system. But it is a huge system in the human body and in the human nervous system. In fact, arguably, it's one of the biggest systems in our body. And yet so many of us don't know very much about it. So what does that all mean? How can I justify that something we barely heard of is maybe one of the most important neurotransmitter systems in the human nervous system? And that has to do with the sheer number have cell receptors on them where they receive information from the outside world, use that to combine to create responses, thoughts, reflex patterns, etc. And so what's going on in the nervous system and in the human body in general is a huge amount of biological information is crossing through the endocannabinoid system at any one particular point in time. It is not a static system, meaning it just doesn't sit there, but it is very active and very dynamic. So it changes as we change. When we are feeling good, the endocannabinoid system is robust. And I always refer to it as like the internet of our body. It's how cells can send texts or email messages to each other, how an immune cell can talk to a nerve cell or a cell in the brain, for example. So it is a rapid response system. Likewise, when we feel bad or if there is an injury or an event like a stroke or a heart attack, the endocannabinoid system very rapidly responds and changes. So if you think about your day-to-day life and how we as on our cell phones connect with other humans, if that cell phone were like a cell in the body, and the internet wasn't working well, we wouldn't be able to use the information in our cell phone, whether that be photos, texts, videos, etc., to share with other people. And likewise, they wouldn't be able to share with us. So what ends up happening in these very important systems in the body that are affected by the endocannabinoid system is you get a breakdown effect where the system is not working. We see this in a lot of diseases that classically, in terms of 20th century medicine, not 21st century medicine, were somewhat mysterious to us, fairly resistant to treatment a lot of the time. And we didn't really have a good grasp on the exactitudes of the underlying mechanism. Things like migraine headache, for example, fibromyalgia. Can now be thought of, irritable bowel disease can now be thought of as a problem with our body's internet, the endocannabinoid system. I'm going to start saying ECS for endocannabinoid system. So that's just a general basics. Now, on the flip side of things, when we do things, even if we're not feeling great, for example, or we're feeling a little run down, when we do things that are classically thought of as healthy or good for us, things like improving our diet, exercise, omega-3 essential fatty acids, such as in cold water fish like salmon or halibut, meditation, even things like acupuncture or chiropractic adjustments. When we do those positive things for ourselves, part of what is happening is those actually are also impacting our ECS, our endocannabinoid system, and helping it function better. It is involved in every single physiologic process that we have studied where the body maintains things within a certain limit. So sleep-wake cycle, for example, hunger and feeding, for example, and also very much involved in injury, tissue cell repair, and also organ protection, such as nerve protection, cardiovascular protection, even kidney and liver protection. So that's kind of a long explanation. We went into that in quite in depth in episode 5 of the podcast. So folks who want more information can feel free to examine that. And did you have any questions or any comments about any of that, Cassandra?
No, I don't. And I think that, part of the important thing that we need to remember is, the endocannabinoid system is this, as a self-regulating system, is impacted by so many things. To your point, from massage is a great way to increase your endocannabinoid
Fantastic.
system. You had mentioned a research study on opera singers and singing.
Singing, yes. And when we sing, hey, don't you feel great when you sing?
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's in the car or in the shower, I think it's phenomenal. I like to sing in the car with other people. I know not everybody likes that, but it's way more fun than even singing with myself. And what are we doing when we are either playing music or singing, for example? We are at the same time we are projecting, but we're also listening, because you have to be matching that pitch so that the nervous system is very activated in the process of listening to or playing or singing music. So it goes to this concept of a system that is both listening and then responding at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's a fantastic study. Lots of things that we do that feel good and are thought of as good. Massage, you mentioned it. Not only does it feel good, but it's good for us too, right? Singing is the same way. Hugs can affect the endocannabinoid system.
All right, ladies, if you're looking for healthy hair, beautiful skin, and a calm, quiet, clean, collected, powerful mind with superior CBD, go to evoqbeauty.com. That's EVOQ beauty.com. And you'll receive 25% off your very first order with the code AWAKEN. Again, that's evoqbeauty.com. Use the code AWAKEN for 25% off your first order. I think to go into that just a little bit more on the metaphysical, though, because the endocannabinoid system, to the point of singing or to the point of massage, there's all different ways that we can manage and manipulate our endocannabinoid system. And, going back into, and you've done an interview in the past, and you don't know this, but I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. And so when you apply, and you've talked about this in a previous episode with Candace Pert and some of her research, that we can no longer ignore the yin and yang, the frequency, this really beautiful rapport with our body, and how there's all different ways that we can keep our endocannabinoid system in check. And just thinking, the power of our thoughts also creates this frequency for our endocannabinoid system that puts us back into this place of homeostasis and bringing us back into balance with alignment. And so really what we're going to be talking about today are just more tools, a lot more data to back up that we have different pieces, and today we're looking to nature that can really bring us back into balance and be in our most optimal mind body, right? Because Candace Pertz has no differentiation between the mind and body, because there is no differentiation. Just like all of these receptor cells that you're talking about, they're always listening and they're always responding. So therefore, we're in full control of how we listen and how we can help the body respond, from how we think, what we use topically, what we put in our body, and how we want to use cannabis, not as a crutch, but as an enhancement for our health.
It can be an enhancement for our tool, and it can be a way for us to shape our reality in terms of how we interface with a stressful environment, potentially.
Right.
So on the metaphysical side, I want to just talk real briefly about part of what is going on to make this very complex system a little more understandable. Part of what the endocannabinoid system is doing is it is checking and monitoring insides and outsides. So what do I mean by that? That's kind of abstract. So we have a cell, right? And there's an inside of the cell and there's an outside of the cell. Inside the cell are all of the cellular mechanisms that the cell requires to have health, to perform its functions, to reproduce, etc. So part of what the endocannabinoid system is doing is it is measuring changes that are happening inside the cell, and it is measuring changes that are happening outside of the cell, and it is adjusting. And it does that not only on the cellular level, it does that on the level of tissues for your biology aficionados, on the level of organ systems, as well as on the level of the whole organism, as well as how we interact with society. So how society from the outside affects us on the inside, that is an endocannabinoid effect. So things like hugs, for example, laughter from a funny movie, the music will influence us in a positive way. Our diet, things that we take in from the outside to the inside, will positively enhance the endocannabinoid system. So it really is about boundaries and maintaining good, healthy boundaries, which are part of the time boundaries need to be built, and sometimes boundaries need to be broken down. The endocannabinoid system is really, if you think about it in terms of insides and outsides, it might be helpful for folks.
Yeah, I really love that. It's just the metaphysical piece of this, I think, is really, really powerful, just as much as the scientific. So,
and then there's, yes, and sorry to interrupt, but it just flashed in. And then there is the whole planetary health cycle too. Yeah. So when we plant cannabis or hemp, and I'm talking trillions of plants as a global industry that the hemp industry is becoming, we are taking carbon dioxide out of the air and we are putting oxygen back into the air. So it can help solve issues we're having with global warming. The plant makes a perfect protein, so we can solve global hunger issues with this plant. And then all of the industrial uses, including hemp-based biodiesel, for crying out loud, we could be growing our own fuel as well. So many cases of insides, outsides, and additionally, when we as humans have a stressful environment, or our environment goes from somewhat normal to stressful, that affects our endocannabinoid system, and we can do something about it now. We have tools and the beginnings of an understanding of how to interface better with our reality.
Absolutely. I love that. It's very, very clear. It's just profound. And going back to that community connectivity, it really is a global effect. So today we kind of want to, and I know you really love this topic as much as I do, as far as my perspective goes. I've formulated beauty products and hair products and different essential oil blends for internal and external health for probably 15 years. And so I'm not new to the world of essential oils, in which I'm going to bring up first, because this is how the consumer would be first and foremost introduced to what they understand terpenes to be.
It's a great entry there. Good. Great
so
entry into that topic.
Essential oils, what we want to talk about is, we have CBD, we have THC, we have these different compounds out of the cannabis plant, whether from hemp, cannabis, whatever strain that is. But terpenes are that kind of third kind of largest compound weight coming out of these plants. And let's just kind of open up to what terpenes are, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about, if you really are in the cannabis industry, we really get hung up in the chemotypes and the strains between sativa and indica, and how we've always believed sativa to be energetic and indica to be bringing us down, calming us and grounding us. That's not the full story, and really how we can use terpenes as both a consumer and myself as a formulator to get very, very specific on what kind of healing therapeutic benefits we can bring to a client, consumer, what have you. So maybe you want to jump in and just give us a wide understanding of terpenes.
Absolutely.
We can jump into them specifically.
So, and again, what we can do is we can talk about this inside and outside dynamic and its communication. So terpenes are molecules that plants make. Cannabis makes terpenes. Terpenes are also made by other plants. Pine trees will make a terpene called pinene. Which gives you that pine fresh scent, so to speak. Citrus plants will make a limonene or a lemonine, which is a citrus-based molecule. Other plants like black pepper, so many plants make terpene molecules. So not just the cannabis plants make terpenes. So lavender is another classic example we'll talk about here shortly. So we have an ability to improve the medicinal aspect of cannabis medicines through terpenes, whether they be produced by the cannabis plant itself or from other plants. Terpenes share precursor molecules with cannabinoids. So they're structurally somewhat similar because they are using some of the same building blocks. And the terpenes are responsible for the smell and the flavor of cannabis. So why is it that a lemon kush smells like a little citrus in there? Or why is it that a certain other one will have kind of a sagey or a piney smell? A strawberry kush will even almost have a fruity kind of a flavor to it. Those are the result of the terpene molecules. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture and other regulatory agencies in the federal government put terpenes in the GRAS category, GRAS, generally recognized as safe. They're put in food products all of the time, and even cleaning products. So we can assume with a very high likelihood of certainty that terpenes are very, very safe. When fresh, you mentioned topicals, they are non-sensitizing to skin. When they age a little bit, that can change, but especially the fresh terpenes. Terpenes will also interact with our cells and provide information to our cells. They can act on enzymes. They can act on second messenger systems, which are communication molecules, neurotransmitters. So they produce they're very safe, and they produce physiologic effects. Now, why in the world are plants making these molecules? They make them for a number of reasons, but generally they're stress molecules for plants. Plants will get different types of stress. One type of stress that plants can get is not having enough nutrition in the soil. When there's not enough nitrogen, the plant will respond by making more terpenes. Or if and plants do this a lot. The French have a saying about wine. In order to make a great wine, the grapes must suffer. And what they mean by suffering is usually hot, dry days and cold nights. And so those grapes out in the fields, wilting under the hot heat of the sun, they don't produce terpenes, but they'll produce flavonoid molecules, resveratrol, etc. So plants will frequently do this. What the plants use terpenes for one of the stress that plants have is that they're frequently eaten by other things. Some plants, like apples, actually want us to eat them. Other plants don't want you to touch them. When a plant has a role in an ecosystem where it generally wants to avoid being eaten, it will produce molecules that affect the insects or the herbivores that are feeding on it. Typically, those are terpenes. Terpene concentration will increase during the drying process, because in the drying process, the weight is going down, but hopefully you're keeping the terpenes in there. And as I mentioned, terpenes aren't consistent even within the same plant. So, for example, the top of plant A and the bottom of plant A, same plant, are going to have different terpene profiles. For example, up in the upper flowers, we'll get a lot of the lemon and pine that protect the plants from being eaten by insects. That's one of the reasons an insect or a lemon rind or even an orange rind is so bitter, is because it is preventing, there's something delicious inside of there, but it is also the outside is a preventative barrier. And then other compounds at the bottom of the plant, like beta-caryophyllene, are designed not to work against insects, but to work on mammals, squirrels, rabbits, friendly forest creatures we typically think of, but they're not friendly if you're a plant.
Yeah.
And again, we mentioned that there was an environmental piece to the terpene production, but they are also very much genetically predetermined. So you mentioned chemotypes. And so I want to just go over a couple of real interesting studies. We can take rodents who inhale terpenes from the air, and we can see, you can measure their movements literally with a camera before the delivery and after the delivery. And so, for example, certain uplifting terpenes, you can literally see the humans moving, the animals moving around more quickly. And in humans, we can see positive effects from them, even at undetectable blood levels. So think of aromatherapy. You get just a whisper of that rose essential oil, and it affects, rose is very good for grief, for example. And so you get just the littlest wisp of that rose, and all of a sudden there's a momentary release. Some studies are showing strong serotonin activity. So some of these are actually landing on known receptor systems and causing relaxing or anxiety relieving effects. So that's a pretty broad general overall of the how, what, and why of terpenes. I don't know if you have any questions, and we could also certainly talk about a few of the basic terpene molecules as well.
Yeah, I think to pull out in what you had just kind of gone through on, different ways of how we can study the effects of terpenes when applying them to topicals, for instance. So one really cool thing that you brought out just on your own, which is how I formulate products, is going back to all the way back to the point and very essence of the first molecules on this planet being that of the ocean. You know, we have this plasma in the ocean that is actually the plasma inside our body, and it's very biomolecular to all of the different components that we're made of. And so what I'm getting to is how we formulate is we put all of the closest biomimetic products that we can into a product so that the body can invite them in and have a conversation with them so that they're actually therapeutic and can bring benefit in a very symbiotic way. Same way that we look at terpenes. So when we put essential oils and products, consumers are looking for a scent, and they want something that smells good. Some things will turn them off based on a memory they have, based on it just not jiving with their metaphysical, what we've talked about. But that's not how I formulate with terpenes. And to your point, what you're talking about in cannabis plant, botanical plants, they will carry these beautiful compounds and scents based on protection and how they interact with their world around them. And so when we're looking to actually, whether it's in cannabis or a strain type, or it's in a topical, we're looking to either soothe or we're looking to bring fortification and strength to the skin through a certain terpene.
Yes.
There's this correlation and this play with that same strength, and just emulsification in a terpene can bring the same thing to the skin and how it can fortify, build up the strength in the skin, and create an effect on the skin. We're taking those messengers, the message from that terpene and the profile of it from what we know based on scientific research, and there's plenty of it. And then we're applying it to the skin and asking it to do the same thing, both internally and topically. So to what you're saying, I just want to bring out in a very consumer-esque way of how we interact with these every day and how I formulate is if I want to build resilience in your skin, I'm going to use resilient terpenes. If I want to calm down your skin, I'm going to bring grounding and calming terpenes. So there's this biomimetic response when we're putting in and topically. So based on that and how we formulate, strawberry kush, OG kush, blue haze. Unfortunately, we have all these really, really crazy names, but we know there's research out there from autoimmune diseases, from celiac disease. We now have these different profiles of terpenes that we can put into cannabis products. Powerful terpenes are known in these different strains to actually heal people as severe as experiences and ailments such as celiac disease, meaning there's extreme power behind them versus pharmaceuticals and what we turn to conventionally.
For you, listeners of Awaken Beauty podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Simply go to www.audibletrial.com/Awaken Beauty podcast. That's www.audibletrial.com Awaken Beauty podcast.
So let's peel apart some of the main terpenes, some that we look at are, limonene, linalool, myrcene, beta-caryophyllene. They have all these different attributes. So let's just open up a few of them and we can talk.
Sure. So you mentioned myrcene. So part of the terpene choice profile, part of what you can think about is what are you looking for in the plant? So are you looking for itch relief in a topical, for example, or are you looking for a strain that will allow you to have pain reduction, but still not be cloudy in your head so that you can do some form of functioning, even if it's simply just cooking a meal or something along those lines? Or do you want it to help you go to sleep? These are some very different uses, and you will want to incorporate different terpene profiles to help you get those. So myrcene is one of the relax or sedative molecules in cannabis. It's also present in mangoes, for example. Lemongrass has myrcene in it. And not only is it very good slow down, it's what gives cannabis the couch lock effect. So the typical person staring at the TV with their mouth open, eating chips, etc. That relaxation effect is a myrcene effect. But it's not only does it relax the mind and the body, it does provide pain relieving effect, and very importantly, for topicals, for example, muscle spasm relief.
Mm-hmm.
So you can utilize a high myrcene cannabis to do all of those. Or if you look at the label and you're like, oh, I really like this strain, I like how it makes me feel, but I'm wanting something a little more muscle spasm, you can add terpenes from the outside of the product. So you could have, for example, a mango smoothie, or even a mango pineapple drink, something, a lemongrass tea, for example, will have myrcene in it. So you can add it from either using it with the cannabis plant or from the outside. So a lot of the times, as you mentioned, Cassandra, when formulating, you're looking at the price of, as a manufacturer, the cost of the goods that go into it, and you can maybe get the myrcene molecule much more affordably from a non-cannabis plant and add it. This is why a lot of botanical formulations use multiple plants.
Let's just stop right there for a second, because I think I want to kind of pause right there, because when you're looking at how you're formulating a product with terpenes and essential oils, it is a commodities market. And terpenes, meaning essential oils, can be very expensive. Okay, so to your point of rose, we have to, squish up and stomp on, thousands of pounds of rose petals to get the very minute piece of
50,000 rose petals to produce a single ounce of the oil. It's very, and I'll tell you what, don't just buy any rose oil.
Yeah.
And compare them with each other. A Moroccan rose, an Egyptian rose, just go and smell a bunch of them. They're not all the same. Even within the rose family, there are differentiations. So yes.
Yeah, I have a beautiful rose otto that we blend. It's just incredible. But the experience that you have when you have this rose, that metaphysical, that energy that rose brings is absolutely out of this world. But when you're looking at a cannabis product and you're looking at, let's say, a CBD product, because that is the most vastly sold cannabis on the market today, there is a very big difference on taking certain strains and an end product that has meticulous, strategized terpenes put in for a therapeutic response. And this, a lot of consumers will get very confused. Well, why there's 2 points, quality, and then there's another point of how it's actually blended and what the strategic effect of the product is. But you're going to get into higher price ranges when you have terpenes that are put in for specific reasons and therapeutic benefits versus just, all slam it in, throw it into some MCT oil and call it an entourage effect product. That's great. But the minuteness of the terpenes and how you can manipulate a product with these terpenes is why our product and why some products with CBD are going to have higher amounts of therapeutic effects, more strategic study behind them, and more consistency. So, as we kind of can float down, let's maybe go into limonene, why, it's got this antidepressant.
Absolutely. So you mentioned this, and a lot of people think, we need studies. Well, actually, we have human studies now with D-limonene, and there's something called a Hamilton Depression Score. So we can actually go through and give an accurate or a relatively accurate number in terms of gauging changes in somebody's depression. So there's a tool, and depressed patients exposed to citrus in the air show a normalization of their Hamilton depression scores. And like many things with cannabis, they reduce their antidepressant medication. So that is a peer-reviewed study. It is, as I mentioned, an antidepressant through inhalation. It also affects serotonin, and that may be the primary cause, or it may be a kind of a synergistic cause, but actually will affect serotonin pathways. Limonene can help with GERD too, because remember, the rind of an orange or of a lemon is very bitter. So sometimes those bitter molecules can interact with the digestive tract, and you get which is why we a lot of the times in old school naturopathic medicine recommend bitters after a meal.
Right.
It literally, that lower is in the lower esophagus, the tube that takes food from our mouth to our stomach, the esophagus, there's a sphincter down there that is activated with bitter compounds. So these molecules do things to our bodies. And also in cell tissue studies, effective for breast cancer in the tissue, in the test tube, not in the humans. I always think of how bright and clean a room smells when my mom would used to use lemon fresh pledge to polish all the front. And you walk in and you smell that. Not that I recommend that as a terpene delivery method, but you smell that fresh citrus smell and it just feels clean. You feel clean. That's, I think, the basics of the limonene. One of the common ones that you can really smell, if you smell your cannabis flowers, you'll definitely pick up some citrus hints with this. And so even if you don't have a laboratory printout, some of these molecules can be smelled. Definitely, if you have an educated nose, you can pick those out. And what I mean by an educated nose, just smell them yourself and see, does that smell like lemon? Or if you have a friend who has a really good nose and you don't, that's a good way to have a communication. And again, the oral tradition where we literally are sharing our knowledge of plants with each other. So.
Yeah. And when you walk into when you're walking into a facility to buy cannabis, unfortunately, it's not legal here in Minnesota, but that is, if you have an educated bud tender, that is a part of their job, is to really walk you through, have you experienced, have your body pull in kind of like a fine wine and see what your body is adapting and attracted to in that moment. Because to your point, the endocannabinoid system is always changing. It's
every minute, every second. That's right.
So you always have different needs of the body and different, so we can't get fixated on I like X or I had a bad experience with X, because we have to pay note to, again, going back to
you can, but if you have a favorite cannabis strain, say, for example, you're a recreational user and you really like a true blueberry, and that's all you've got, after a while, It's not going to be your favorite strain for a little while, because you're, just like I love Thai food. That doesn't mean on my 12th meal in a row of Thai food, I don't want something else after that, right? So great, good, excellent discussion. So on the lines of uplifting terpenes, why don't we talk about pinene? Pinene, there's this Japanese word, and it's escaping my memory right now, but it's literally forest bathing. And it's not like taking your clothes off in the forest, but taking a walk in the forest and getting cleansed. And we now know taking walks in the forest is good and uplifting. We have actual human data. And one of the molecules that's present in the forest air is pinene. Pinene used to be fairly common in before the age of medicinals and legalization. We used to see a lot more pinene in cannabis than we used to. And a lot of it got bred out by the black market, because one of the things that pinene does is that THC can make anybody, and depending on the terpene profile, it can make one more or less stupid. So to use people can get dumb when they smoke too much marijuana. Pinene, lots of regular users will say certain strains of marijuana make me want to go to sleep, but certain strains, I've never written so well as and a lot of the time the pinene helps keep the mental very clear while it's under the influence of THC. And if you look at the labeling, pine scents are relatively rare, or at least more rare than they used to be. Yeah,
pinene also, if we look at just the brain dis-ease and the, the memory fortification, it's known to be an antibiotic. It's great for memory boosting proprities. It's also great for the lung and clearing that up. So that very pungent really brings this awakening.
And so I know there are a wide variety of your listeners, but for the science nerds out there, the anti-inflammation properties are being run through the prostaglandin pathways. We also know that it is a bronchodilator, and cannabis in general dilates. So you smoke tobacco, the airways shrink. You smoke cannabis, and I don't recommend that you smoke cannabis, but if you inhale it, the airways open. It used to be an old remedy for asthma. Cannabis used to be an old remedy for asthma because unlike tobacco, which closes airways, it helped open the airways. So in the memory aid, it's acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, as is caffeine, for example. So you know how sometimes, like if you're a regular caffeine user, it doesn't affect you as much. But if you only have a cup of coffee once a month or so, when you have that cup of coffee, you can go from being a pretty tired person to really sitting on the keyboard and getting that email out, or, you know, whatever it is that you're doing. So we do have, and we do understand some of the physiologic mechanisms of the pinene. And again, if you are wanting or needing THC, let's say you have nausea and vomiting, but you want to have it for your dinner, but you're also having house guests, and you don't want to just sit there and watch the boob tube while you're eating by yourself. You want to be interacting. Pinene might be a pine-oriented. And if you don't have a pinene-oriented plant, you can get some pine essential oil, which is one of the more affordable. Put that in a little diffuser. Boom. All of a sudden it's in the air. And everybody has a good meal.
I also think about pinene and wintergreen and some of these.
Yes.
You know, if we really think about some of our blends for pain relief topicals, it's really, really great to use like a wintergreen or pinene for, you know, that vasodilation as well as...
And good for bruising. Yep, good for bruising.
Yep.
Yep.
So moving off of pinene, let's talk a little bit about linalool, because this is probably one of the wider and most used terpenes across industries at large, which would look like lavender, which there are all kinds of strains of lavender, but linalool conveying this really aromatic experience with cannabis, but is also sedating, relaxing, and calming. And also has this nice pain relief, anti-anxiety, and grounding effect. So maybe if you can talk a little bit more about linalool.
Linalool is wonderful in a topical. If you are making formulations either for yourself or for, meaning I'm going to make some coconut oil. One of the great things that linalool will do is it takes away the veg smell of cannabis. So if you want a better smelling product, it's a good one. I mean, granted, the pines smell nice and the lemons smell nice, but a little bit of lavender goes a long way in terms of
does a nice job
fragrance. It really does. In terms of anti-anxiety, absolutely yes. And it modulates the GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and glutamate receptors. So it will aids in the anti-anxiety effect. And we know that when we do an inhalation of the lavender oils in animals, it calms them down. So we had a prior animal study where they pumped the citrus fragrance and the animals get more alert. You pump in the linalool, the lavender fragrance, people get relaxed. All you need to do is walk into any store where they sell botanical products and smell the lavender pillow. It really takes an edge off really quickly, especially that first blast. The pain relieving effects are on adenosine receptors. So we have somewhat of a mechanism of action that we understand that way. And also can be really good, not just in atmospheric product that goes into the air, but can be really nice on in a topical as well.
Could we please can you explain a little bit more when you say has an effect on adenosine receptors? Because this is a really big receptor. It has a lot of different places in the body.
Sure.
Adenosine receptors.
Adenosine receptors are important for anti-anxiety, which I had mentioned. They're also contribute to vasorelaxation and smooth muscle relaxation. So anything that does vasal relaxation will also usually calm the gut, so to speak, and are also involved in cardiovascular function. I know a little bit less about. So it has the adenosine receptors don't do just one thing. They do a number of things.
Yeah.
Also, CBD lands on adenosine receptors too. So, and they're not the same molecule. So we can be getting either additive or synergistic effects. We don't know which they are yet. What's the difference between an additive effect and a synergistic effect? An additive effect means that it just you add 1 unit, it gives you 1 extra unit of effect. You add 2 units, it gives you 2 extra units of effect. That's an additive effect. A synergistic effect is if you add 2 units, 2 extra units, it might give you 4 times the effect. So it's greater than the sum of the parts as opposed to this additive, which is the sum of the parts. So it can also, the linalool can also positively interact with CBD. And again, what else does CBD do? It lowers blood pressure and relaxes those blood vessels. So we're starting to see, when we look at the receptors, we start to see the overlap between some of these plant molecules.
So we've talked about myrcene, we've talked about pinene, linalool. We've also gone over limonene. Those are kind of the top ones. Mm-hmm. Beta-caryophyllene is a really great one. So we find that in peppers, we find that in kind of capsaicin, and the beta-caryophyllene is found in a lot of different strains of cannabis. And it has a really, really significant role. And one reason that I really prize terpenes is that when you think about, I explain it like a flock of geese. And you have that very, very head of the flock of geese and all these behind the geese. That's kind of what I accentuate the essential oil or terpene to, is it helps the product. We've talked about the outside and the inside of the cell, but the terpenes can actually help the product get into and drive over the blood-brain barrier. And I think that beta-caryophyllene is one of these specifically that really, really helps as a carrier to dig it deeper and through the blood-brain barrier.
I do believe that to be true, yes. And beta-caryophyllene also lands on cannabinoid receptors. And also I'm not aware of studies in cannabis, but myrcene in non-cannabis studies also affects blood-brain barrier. So you can actually sometimes get more of the effective chemicals in. Again, plants will use the terpene to inhibit insects and animal eating. And also what the plant does is the terpene, because I kind of like the smell of beta-caryophyllene. It kind of smells clovey, like if you've ever smelled a clove cigarette. But I like it. Some people don't necessarily like it, but the plant uses it to drive away the insects it doesn't like, but there's a type of insect that it likes. You know how roses like ladybugs because the ladybugs will eat the aphids, right? The plants that use beta-caryophyllene will attract these insects called lacewing insects, and those lacewing insects will eat the insects that the plant doesn't like. So there's the same chemical pushes the type of insect that it wants away, and it brings the friendly insect to it. So these molecules, again, are designed to work on the receptors of other organisms, so they naturally have parts of them that will fit our receptors. The anti-inflammatory effect and pain-relieving effect occur at very low concentrations, which make them ideal to put in a topical. And you could also take it internally. One of the best uses for beta-caryophyllene is if you've had too much THC, usually with an edible, and you're just having a bad time and it's not fun and this is not what you asked for and you wish you didn't take that much, take a peppercorn, put it between your molars, bite down on it, and kind of like a smelling salt, it can kind of break that negative thought pattern cycle that the THC can cause. It's also stomach protective. So if you are doing pain, if you're a chronic pain patient, one of the hugest problems with NSAID medications for pain is that they're terrible for the digestive tract. I mean, really bad. They cause people to, the GI complication of NSAID cause a lot of people to die. Not hundreds of people every year, but thousands of people every year. And that's well established in the literature. And then there are other strange things that it does, like it has some anti-malarial properties, so that Plasmodium mosquito does not like the smell of that black pepper, and so we'll stay away. I think, and this is an important clinical pearl for any neurodegenerative disorder, multiple sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, or even neuroinflammatory disorders or seizure activity. If there is a neural component, I think that is one good time to add extra terpenes. A product that's higher in beta-caryophyllene is going to have markedly more beneficial effects a number of doctors are reporting this. This is something that is more based on physicians' clinical observations. I'm not sure that there are specific studies on this, but very apparent in epilepsy patients, for example. So I think beta-caryophyllene is a very, very important. It is also both a sesquiterpene, which means it's a terpene, and many people consider it a cannabinoid as well because it lands on cannabinoid receptors. So very interesting molecule.
All right, ladies, if you're looking for natural, organic, solution-based beauty and superior CBD, go to evoqbeauty.com. That's EVOQbeauty.com and receive 25% off your very first order with the code AWAKEN. Again, that's EVOQbeauty.com. Type in the code AWAKEN for 25% off your first order. Based on, we've kind of gone over some of the top terpenes. Are there any other studies or anything that you want to kind of fold up the terpene talk as far as?
Yes, I had made a couple of notes and I had wanted to mention something about the Cannabis perp. I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, if readers have questions, we could always revisit that in another episode potentially. So
yeah, no worries. And so I think some things to remember is, how much essential oil or terpene is in a product can affect a product, what kinds of terpenes are in there. And so this really, what I love about this conversation is there's so much more to cannabis, CBD, and THC. And when you really want to get into the nuances of healing and the benefits of these different plants, what Jake has really, really eloquently, gone over is just this push and pull with the plants and how they coexist with nature and how we can use this coexistence to our benefit because we understand and we know what they do. Right. So to the consumer, I just want to let them know when you're shopping, these are the nuances that you should, if you've now been using CBD and you're not getting results or you've plateaued and you want to change your experience, these are the ways that as I feel as though we've thrown the CBD consumer in the ocean, so to say, and we're saying swim, and they're just kind of paddling along and they're trying to figure out what to use, why it's not having enough.
Yep.
These are some of the things to look at and to ask a professional and, whoever you're getting your CBD from, specifically, what kind of terpenes do you use?
Yes. And we know that the single molecule CBD is vastly inferior. And I hate to say this because it has some beneficial effects. Yep. I have personally used CBD isolate myself and I get an effect, but you can enhance the effect for whatever it is that you are going for. And it also gives you as a consumer a really unique opportunity to participate in your own healthcare, your own self-care, and to manage not only your health, but to manage how you interact with the environment. By enhancing the endocannabinoid system, you reduce the anxiety-provoking influences of environmental change, which, there's so much. We all can relate to that as modern humans. I'm sure everyone listening can relate to that. Anything more on that? I had wanted to chat about I've been getting a lot of questions about some of these liver toxicity claims in a lot of the literature. Is that something you wanted to segue to, Cassandra, or do you want to do a little bit more on that prior talk?
No, I think terpenes, I think this is just a really nice opening of the conversation. I think right before we get to the liver toxicity research, I think that's really important to bring out as far as the data, which is true and not true, is just a little bit on topicals,
Oh, sure.
A lot about internal, and it, if we just kind of want to briefly talk about, and we've done a previous episode on topicals with Emma Chasen and Elisa with Elementa, but specifically the skin has CB2 receptors within the skin, within the tissue, and cannabis can help regulate over 1,000 different genes in the body, and 165 of them are actually in the skin. And so we have this communication within the CB2 receptors within the skin. And so to kind of curtail with terpenes and how they help drive it better, deeper into the skin. When I look at cannabinoids and topical, we're looking for pain relief. We're looking for people that don't want to get the head high. There's a lot of different applications. And maybe you want to just kind of briefly talk about how you've actually used topicals in your practice and what you've seen as far as a benefit from that.
Topicals can be really great for pain. So if you've got pain, I think you should be thinking of topicals. And that includes musculoskeletal pain. It could be migraine headache pain, where you just rub a little of the lotion or topical on the temples or the back of the neck. There are benefits to every delivery method. So there are benefits to edibles. There are disadvantages to edibles, benefits to inhalation, disadvantages. Same is true with topicals. One of the main benefits of topicals is that you can use a product with THC to get an extra synergistic boost, and it will not give you a head high.
Right.
In fact, the early human studies that we have won't even cause a positive on a drug screen. Now that's a limited study, but we at least have human studies now that demonstrate that. What's going on in a topical is it's kind of like the analogy that I like to use. Let me grab my cell phone because I will use this as a prop. I have a Bluetooth speaker and I have a cell phone. I can change the volume in the room by pressing the buttons on the Bluetooth speaker or from the cell phone. So topicals kind of act like they kind of act like the cell phone. When you have, let's say, for example, you have a sore shoulder or a sore knee, and you put the topical on the knee or the shoulder, what that does is in the local area, it turns the nerve signaling down. We talked about retrograde inhibition a little bit in episode 5 that we did. So folks can go back and listen to that. But it turns the signal down at the source, which is like turning the pain volume down at the cell phone level versus in the brain so when you take the CBD or the hemp product or the cannabis product orally, that's like turning it down in the brain, and it has a little bit of an effect in the periphery. Using a topical is more like turning it down at the from the cell phone versus at the speaker. So the other thing that we know that topicals do is we know that they get into the underlying muscle tissue. And so anyone who's a weekend warrior like myself, try and stay healthy and go to the gym in the week and really overdo it on the weekend, or you're just getting back into the gym and you have sore muscles, it can be really good for the sore muscles. But what else it's doing is it does have a central acting part where when we put the topicals on the skin, they are somehow also getting to the pain centers in the spinal cord. So the body is somehow either transporting them or they are diffusing up a meridian line somehow. We don't know exactly, but they are getting into the spinal cord. So there is actually also a central effect. Additionally, excellent CBD, even at low concentrations, is a very good antibacterial, which includes for MRSA, but it also includes for acne, which is a bacteria. So it can be really good for acne. Hemp oil in and of itself has an SPF of 4. So just putting hemp oil without any cannabinoids on gives you a layer of protection. But if you add the CBD, that can add an additional layer of UV protection. And if the ultraviolet gets through and into the skin cell to damage the DNA, there are protective elements of the CBD that can actually also help there. Plus, if you happen to get a burn from the sun, a sunburn, it can help with the pain. Topical can also help with itching. Itching in the skin biochemically has similarities. It's like nausea and vomiting of the digestive system. Itchiness of the skin can be hard to treat, and topical cannabinoids as well as central cannabinoids are very effective. So if
right.
an itching will drive you mad, if you've ever
right.
had poison ivy or chicken pox as a kid, it will drive you mad.
Well, and not only that, but if we look at, psoriasis, we look at eczema, to put it into like real term, what women are looking for from a topical, I'm putting in a women's perspective, CBD can help anti-aging. Why? Well, anti-inflammatory effects. So it has
also helps with collagen synthesis.
Yep. Helps with protein and collagen synthesis and turning that back on, which goes back to how it helps with apoptosis and helping regulate healthy cell death and cell new birth. And then it also can help with moisture balance to your point, having this just as internally it has this homeostatic response. It's going to, it's going to help turn down the cytokines, throwing off the alarms and anti-inflammatory for acne, but then also help with that sebum production. If it's producing too much sebum, and then it's also going to take down the sebum. So, I think to end our conversation on topicals, we can really see that CBD and maybe the benefit of a little bit of a THC, although I think there are studies that CBD actually helps the skin more than THC as far as receptor type interaction, the interaction with this bidirectional cellular reaction with CBD is an important one. I think that the caution that I would bring as a formulator and someone who sells topicals is this: biomimetic, is it bioavailable, and how is it made? Because there's a difference between a lotion and putting on a transdermal through a lotion with a water base versus a topical with an oil or a balm base. A balm is going to last a little bit longer on the skin for a topical local area relief, whereas a lotion is going to be, the half-life is used up a little bit sooner and a little bit faster. The second thing would be the amount of milligrams in the product. Now, I've heard that 200 milligrams per ounce is the minimum that usually is needed to get a actual effect. So 50 to 20 to 50 to 100 milligrams in a product. It all depends if you're using it every day. It depends if you're using it for pain relief. So we have to get educated as a consumer of just throwing a little bit of CBD in a product is not bring therapy.
And consumers, pay attention, because it's not about the price of the bottle. Bottle A could be small and at a higher price, and bottle B could be big and at a lower price, but the smaller bottle is the better value because you're getting more cannabinoids per your dollar spent. Additionally, you mentioned with topicals concentration. It's pretty apparent, and mostly from animal studies, but it's pretty apparent in the literature that it is dose dependent, meaning you will get better relief from a topical if you use more or use a product that is more concentrated. So be an educated consumer, spend your dollar wisely, do a calculation. It's like, how many milligrams am I getting for my $30 or for my $20 or for my $40? Because when you start doing that, you'll start to see a lot of differences in products. The other thing is that I think that THC plus CBD as a topical, there are also animal studies showing that there is an entourage effect with that. And so if you have a hemp-based or a CBD dominant topical, you can actually enhance it with a tincture, get a little spray bottle, put that on, and the alcohol in the tincture will also help drive the cannabinoids into the skin. So you don't just have to use one product. Also, there are other topicals. Traditional Chinese medicine uses a tiger balm. Tiger balm is naturally high in beta-caryophyllene, so you want to get a little extra beta-caryophyllene in there, put the cannabis product on, rub it in, and then you can follow it up with a little bit of tiger balm and get that kind of that heating sensation. Part of that are from some of the terpenoid molecules that actually cause that effect. Topicals are wonderful. Think of them for pain. Think of them for itching. And you can also think of them for muscle cramps. That could be premenstrual cramping at certain points in times of the cycle. It can be for cramping from athletic events or from multiple sclerosis, for example, neurodegenerative diseases.
Arthritis.
And also think of topicals for muscle soreness. Arthritis is also good, especially in the hands, because those knuckles are so close to the surface in the hands and the feet. Now, if you put a topical on your feet, You need to be very careful as you're walking across the floor, especially if it's in the bathroom, because those oils or lotions can make things very slippery. But other than that, topicals are very well tolerated. Their major downside is that they don't work for a long period of time. So after about 3 or 4, maybe 5 hours, you need to apply more to get the same effect.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So a topical, you can expect that between, I think 3 to 6 is a half-life of a topical, and internal, you're going to get somewhere around a half-life of 11 hours.
All right, ladies, if you're looking for healthy hair, beautiful skin, and a calm, quiet, clean, collected, powerful mind with superior CBD, go to evoqbeauty.com. That's EVOQbeauty.com. And you'll receive 25% off your very first order with the code AWAKEN. Again, that's EVOQbeauty.com. Use the code AWAKEN for 25% off your first order.
I'm very skeptical of many, but not all, patches. And here's why. I read the patents, and all of the patents are talking about the technology is getting everything up into the skin. Now, we know from studies that you can get a plasma, which is a blood concentration of CBD, way, way up near the 100 nanogram per ml concentration with a topical. But just because it is a patch and it has a patent, that patent is taking everything up to the skin. I have yet to see a plasma curve from a patch. That's what I need to see. I'm not saying that they don't, but anyway, there's some nuances there. There's some nuances there.
I have written a couple testing companies because you need it sounds gross, but you need a pig ear test. And you know, for topicals, this is why it is such a touchy subject of stop and go, because CBD is okay cosmetically. You know, it's safe to use in cosmetics. It's okay for topicals, but therein lies the issue. We don't have enough research to understand once it applies, we may feel the effect and we understand the broad use and maybe how long it will last based on consumer experience. Yeah. But we don't have the actual data of how much is actually in the body, how it's working with the body. We have enough, but we don't have enough, so to speak. So I really love what you just brought up there, because it's the same as nanotechnology. For one of our products, we use nano because we're looking for a very specific response. And then most of our others, we use at least 1,000 milligrams per, you know, at least 300 per ounce. So a 1,000 milligram per 8 ounce based on a full entourage, because I know that I have more components with it. So I need a higher vast amount of cannabinoids versus a nano, which is 50 nanometers in size, which is the same size as the pore. So it's going to get in deeper. There's all different ways that people are going to try to prove their product to you. But I mean, take it with caution, and we need more studies.
And what I encourage is, because topicals are extremely subtle, and you may not, they may be working and you don't know it. And what in the world is you mean by that is, when my pain goes from a 6 to a 4, what happens to my brain and my experience? I feel pretty good. I'm having a good afternoon. I'm at a 4. I'm able to even forget my pain for short periods of time. At a 6, it's always there, and it really slows me down. But so you're feeling good. You might even forget that the pain that we really notice when you go from a 4 to a 5 to a 6, you notice right away. But when you go from a 6 to a 5 to a 4, you might not notice. So give your pain a number, put the product on, and wait literally 15, 20 minutes. Check in with your pain again. What most people will experience about a 2-point reduction in the pain scale. It's not going to take a 7 to a 0. For some people, if you're lucky, it might, but it will take a 7 to a 5. It'll take a 6 to a 4. So for me, I will frequently have patients who say, oh, it doesn't really affect me. And then I'll have them do this little test, and then they'll say, oh, you know what? Really, it is giving me, and it's a mild relief. It is not, and also that 2 points you get from a topical, if you use an additional oral product, you might be able to get 1 or 2 more points. So the 2 points you get from a topical is going to be above and beyond what you may get from an oral or an edible product.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And usually when we're suggesting products here, I always, if you've got an arthritic or a high pain locally, I always recommend doing a internal and a topical, taking a journal, writing it down, because, you know, the receptivity, it's the communication and what is the message the cells are receiving. And so internally, hey, stop, slow down. Topically, hey, stop, slow down. You're kind of getting the brain and or the mind body to recognize that it just needs to calm down. So I think both therapeutically are really great to use together if you're a chronic pain client. Now, Dr. Jake, I would love to hear your thoughts on these liver tests, because liver toxicity has come up in the news and they're trying to scare the cannabis industry and consumers. But let's lay it down, brass tacks on the table. And
you always have to be, with science, you always have to be prepared to be wrong. And so whenever I hear these studies, I will always say, you know what, maybe I'm wrong. But I've had so many questions about this lately that I have just this weekend started to do a little bit of research on it. So some delineating factors between things that can cause a liver toxicity that most, quote, good cannabis products would not. One is the dose. Are they using exorbitantly high doses of CBD, like 2,000 milligrams? Some people take 2,000 milligrams. They're usually seizure patients, but most people are way down in the 15 milligram range. So you are 1,900 milligrams and magnitudes higher. That's one factor. So pay attention to that. The second thing is it a single molecule CBD test or a whole plant CBD test? Because the single molecule CBD tests the single molecule products do tend to have higher side effect profiles in the literature. So that is an important thing. Also, delivery methods are important. We just spent time talking about topicals. Liver effects do not happen with topicals, nor do they happen with inhalation. So that if you are a chronic pain patient with a compromised liver, most of the time I think of CBD as protective. But if you don't want to worry about either the liver toxicity or you don't want to worry so much about drug-herb interactions, you can always do the product either through an oral mucosal inhalation, a suppository, we could talk about that at another show, an inhalation, not necessarily smoking, or a topical, and you completely eliminate that piece. Along those things is the study, are the patients concomitantly using, meaning using at the same time their regular seizure medications plus the CBD? Is it a whole CBD, plant CBD, or a single molecule? But if they're using their regular medications, a lot of the time, and they don't change the dose, a lot of the times the CBD will cause, or the combination of the two will cause some issues. And usually in the US, a lot of studies that are looking at CBD and seizure activity, they have the patients eliminate there's other seizure medications. So we could, but in England and some other places, they will not change the medication regimen. So pay attention to that piece. And then the other thing is it a pharmaceutical product? Because a lot of these liver tests are now coming from pharmaceutical products. And let me just, because I want to get this exactly right. So the pediatric formulation is, I don't have the exact study, but they're looking at a pediatric formulation. It is a pharmaceutical CBD product, and they found some interesting side effects. And if you look at how they're listed in the study, one of the negative side effects, and I'm not going to list it the way they have it, because the way they have it, you read it and it's like, ugh. But one of the side effects is decreased appetite. Have you ever thought that might be that's a bad side effect if you're a cancer patient who's losing weight, but it's a good side effect maybe if you're diabetic. So decreased appetite is one side effect. Increased appetite is another. So both of those are considered negative effects. But an increased appetite is really good if you have cancer, and it may not be so good if you have diabetes. Fatigue is another one that is mentioned, and and lethargy. They're kind of similar. Somnolence. So they have three categories: fatigue, somnolence, and lethargy. Yeah. So a lot of these things are very similar. And what do we know that a lot of cannabis does is it makes you tired. That's a great thing if it's at night and you need to get to sleep. It is not a good thing in the daytime. So there's that. Plus, a lot of these medications, especially the prescription ones, will have additives, binders, etc. I will just talk about one because I know our time is short, but there is a strawberry flavoring in one of these products, the pediatric formulation that everybody's so worried about. And this strawberry formulation is a chemical called ethyl methyl phenylglycidate. Ethyl methyl phenylglycidate. It was used, and it is used in the pharmaceutical product. This is, for me, it poses more questions than answers because it's registered as a pesticide ingredient by the EPA. The EPA literally lists this strawberry flavoring as a pesticide ingredient. It's in the CBD product. Okay. Not only that, we know that pesticides cause seizures. What else do we know about this chemical? It causes birth defects in chickens. That's one of the claims, I believe, from this study is they're worried about birth defects. Is it the CBD or is it this artificial strawberry flavoring? It also causes growth retardation and testicular atrophy in rats. And more directly, there were 2 cases noted where the strawberry flavoring caused not just the pesticide correlation, but actually caused reflex seizures. And I'm going to read this from the study, with initial gamma band activity in the anterior inferior insula, that's part of the brain, with decreased activity in the hippocampus, another part of the brain. And this is of interest because CB1 receptors are connected to this gamma band activity and are super active in the hippocampus. So is it the CBD that was causing all these problems, or was it this strawberry flavoring? And you know what? We don't know. But the mainstream echo chamber is saying liver toxicity, liver toxicity, liver toxicity. So pay attention to a few things. Is it a single molecule versus a whole plant? Is it an ultra high dose or a normal dose? Is it being used in conjunction with their seizure medications or their other regular medications, or is it a CBD only study? And then is it a traditional botanical formula that is made ethically without dangerous ingredients? Or do they have these artificial additives that we really can't say what it is that's causing it? So that's kind of the basics in a nutshell. I'm going to be putting these ideas together over the next couple of weeks.
I think that's great. I think that's something that comes to me first mind too is, if we're looking at the strawberry additive, we're looking at other additives as far as what's encompassing the CBD is glutamate toxicity. Yeah. And, you've got liver, you've got glutamate, you've got excitatory. And frankly, depending on a client's ability to detoxify the liver, depending on a client's liver health to begin with, taking excess supplements that are completely natural can cause liver toxicity.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And to that exact point is this, for the patients in these studies where they didn't take them off of their other meds, what's causing
what kind of compromise was there in the first place?
Yeah. So that's a really good point.
Continue to test it and get thousands of people.
Let's look at traditional formulas at quote normal doses with a whole plant product,
right,
where there's not any other medication interfering, and there aren't any unusual additives that we don't really know what are going on. We want to just So
the unfortunate thing is this, Dr. Jake, is that you and I both know we can go to PubMed. We can go to sites that have thousands of studies representing cannabis and their
National Library of Medicine, right?
Yeah, the side effects. The formulator and producer of methadone has come out in public and said that cannabis is the safest plant medicine that has no lethal dosing to his knowledge. Okay. So I think we have to, again, look at the big picture. And, to your point, we're looking for cannabis in all of its natural components that is really healing, has the metaphysical, who produces it, has this incredible energy behind it. Unfortunately, the tests that get published or the studies that get published are those produced by the medical community that is going to have a louder, speaker than all of the thousands of studies and tests that have been published in.
And also there is a conflict of financial interest, because one of the very clear things from the literature is that people using cannabinoid medicines are taking themselves or reducing their levels of multiple classes of medications, not just pain medications, which are very important, but also other medications as well.
So I just want to thank you for your time. And at the end of every episode, I always ask the guests, is there anything that specifically for you uniquely that you've awakened to and from the Awaken Beauty podcast?
Yeah. I think that the thing that I am awakening to is that I've mentioned it earlier when we were talking about the metaphysical aspects of this plant. I think that this part of this plant, what this plant does is it breaks down inappropriate boundaries, and it also can help establish safe, healthy boundaries. So it really is about managing the inside and the outside, whether we're talking about the inside of a cell versus the connective tissue matrix, which is surrounding it, or the inside of the liver from an organ perspective versus its interface with the blood or with the kidneys, etc., or how we as humans interact with society. So PTSD in cannabis, for example, you have an environment that is causing a horrific memory. So that's an inside-outside. The establishment and maintenance of appropriate boundaries involves both building good ones and breaking down bad ones, and cannabis does both of those. That's kind of what I have been thinking about as far as this plant goes.
That's really rich.
You have a great podcast. Your approach is wonderful. I would love to be back. I know you've got a lot of guests, but I would like to thank your listeners. Thank you very much.
Where can we find you?
Yes, I would say you can always Google me and find me at my website at drjakefelice.com. You can also find me on YouTube. Feel free to go ahead and subscribe. I'll be posting our videos there as well. And that's where you can kind of hear some of my other thoughts. And I'd also be super happy to be back on the show anytime you would want me. So thank you.
Dr. Jake Felice. Okay. Truly appreciate it. And thank you, Awaken Beauty listeners, for quality CBD products. Go to evoqbeauty.com, evoqbeauty.com. Make sure you like and subscribe where you listen to podcasts. Find Jake over on his own channel as well. And thank you for your time today. And in the meantime, stay sane, get sleep, and bring your sexy back.
Hello, Awaken Beauties. Thank you for joining Cassandra today. Were you inspired to bring your sexy back? Please like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Interested in high-quality natural products for your hair, skin, and wellness? Please visit evoqbeauty.com. Again, that's evoqbeauty.com. evoqbeauty.com. Until next time, stay sane, get sleep, and bring your sexy back.